You're not broken, you're avoiding something. A brutally honest guide to the fears, habits, and mental gymnastics keeping you stuck, and how to finally stop running from your own life. Introduction. Let's start with some good news you probably don't hear often enough. Nothing fundamentally wrong with you. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not missing some rare gene for discipline, confidence, or success that everyone else secretly has. If you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or strangely behind despite being capable and motivated, the problem is far more ordinary and far more fixable than you think. You're avoiding something. And before you close this book or roll your eyes, let's be clear. Avoidance isn't a character flaw. It's a human strategy. A very clever one, actually. Avoidance protects us from discomfort, uncertainty, embarrassment, failure, and responsibility. It keeps us safe. It keeps us functional. It keeps us busy. It also quietly keeps us stuck. If you're an aspiring leader, a professional trying to level up, an entrepreneur chasing growth, or a lifelong learner who feels like they should be further along by now, avoidance often shows up wearing respectable disguises. It looks like overthinking, like endless preparation, like waiting for clarity, like chasing the next book, course, framework, or credential, like telling yourself, "I'll do it once things calm down." This book is about learning to see through those disguises. Most self-help content focuses on fixing what's wrong with you, your mindset, bits, confidence, and motivation. That can be useful, but it often misses the point. The issue usually isn't that you don't know what to do. It's that you're quietly sidestepping the thing you already know matters. The difficult conversation, the uncomfortable decision. You're not broken, you're avoiding something. The risk that might not pay off. The responsibility you can't outsource. The version of yourself you keep postponing. Avoidance doesn't always feel like fear. For high-functioning, ambitious people, it often feels like being productive but not effective. Like moving a lot without actually going anywhere. Like learning endlessly but acting selectively. You stay busy, capable, and respectable, while something important remains untouched. This ebook isn't here to shame you for that. It's here to help you understand it. Over the chapters that follow, we'll break down how avoidance works, why smart and driven people are especially good at it, and how it sneaks into leadership, careers, money, relationships, and personal growth. We'll look at the subtle ways you might be trading comfort for progress without realizing it, and how to change that without burning your life down or turning into someone you don't recognize. You won't find motivational hype or dramatic reinvention stories here. What you'll find instead are practical insights, clear language, and grounded strategies for facing what you've been postponing at your own pace, in your own way, with far less drama than you expect. This is not a book about becoming fearless. Fear doesn't disappear when you're doing meaningful work. This is a book about becoming honest about what you want, what you're avoiding, and what it's costing you to keep avoiding it. Because once you stop treating avoidance as a personal defect and start seeing it as a pattern, something interesting happens. The fog lifts, the self-criticism quiets down, and forward, movement, real, sustainable progress starts to feel possible again. You don't need to become a different person. You don't need to fix your personality. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You just need to stop running from the one thing that's been quietly running your life. Let's start there. Chapter 1. The good news nobody's telling you. Let's get something straight right away. Feeling stuck does not mean you're failing. That might sound obvious, but if you're anything like most competent, driven people, you don't experience stuck as a neutral signal. You experience it as a verdict. Something must be wrong with me. I should be further along by now. Other people seem to have figured this out. Why haven't I? So you assume the problem is you. Here's the good news. Nobody bothers to tell you. Most people who feel stuck aren't broken. They're transitioning. And transitions are uncomfortable by design. Stuckness is rarely a sign of incompetence. It's usually a sign that your current strategies Identities or expectations have stopped working, but you haven't yet replaced them with better ones. That gap feels awful. It feels like failure, but it's actually information. The problem is that we're terrible at interpreting that information. Instead of asking, "What is this feeling trying to tell me?" we jump straight to, "What's wrong with me?" And once you frame the problem that way, everything that follows gets distorted. You start trying to fix yourself, your mindset, your discipline, your confidence, when none of those things are actually broken. This is where self-help often makes things worse. A lot of personal development content is built on the assumption that if you're unhappy or stuck, it's because you're missing something. Motivation, clarity, hustle, a better routine, a more positive attitude. So you go looking for upgrades, another book, another framework, another system, another version of yourself. And for a while, that feels productive. You're doing something, but deep down, the stuck feeling doesn't go away. In fact, it often gets louder because now you're working harder just to stay in the same place. Here's what's actually happening. When you label stuckness as failure, you turn a neutral signal into an identity threat. And once your identity feels threatened, your brain stops being curious and starts being defensive. You don't observe yourself, you judge yourself. You don't explore, you explain. You don't change, you protect. Self-criticism feels useful in that moment. It feels like accountability. It feels like pressure will force movement. But pressure without direction just creates noise. And noise is the opposite of clarity. Reframing stuckness as feedback changes everything. Feedback doesn't mean you're bad. It means something isn't aligned. It means there's friction, somewhere between what you want and what you're doing, between who you are and who you're trying to be, between the life you've built and the life you actually want to live. That friction is uncomfortable, but it's also precise. It points to something specific, and once you stop attacking yourself, you can finally start noticing what that something is. This is where progress actually begins, not with motivation, not with confidence, not with some dramatic breakthrough, but with observation. Calm, honest observation. What am I avoiding? What feels heavier than it should? Where am I expending energy without getting traction? What decision keeps hovering in the background of my mind? You can't answer those questions when you're busy convincing yourself that you're the problem. But when you drop that assumption, even temporarily, your attention sharpens. The fog starts to thin. And for the first time in a while, you're not trying to escape how you feel. You're trying to understand it. That shift from self-criticism to self-observation is small, but it's powerful. It's the difference between spinning your wheels and finding the road. You don't need to panic about being stuck. You don't need to label it. You don't need to fix yourself. You just need to stop misdiagnosing the problem. Because once you do, you'll realize something quietly relieving. You're not broken, you're just standing at the edge of something you haven't faced yet. And that's where the real work starts. Chapter 2. You're not lazy, unmotivated, or behind. If there's one insult high-performing people throw at themselves more than any other, it's this: I'm lazy. Not the Netflix all day kind of lazy, a more sophisticated version. The kind where you're busy, responsible, capable, and still convinced you're somehow not doing enough. You get things done, just not the thing. And instead of questioning the situation, you question your character. I must lack discipline. Other people work harder than me. If I really wanted this, I'd already have it. These labels feel factual because they come with evidence. You procrastinated. You avoided a task. You didn't follow through. Case closed. Except it's not. Calling yourself lazy, unmotivated, or behind is an emotional shortcut. It gives you a quick explanation without requiring deeper honesty. It turns a complex problem into a simple moral failure. And while that might feel clarifying, it actually shuts down progress. Here's why. Labels don't describe behavior, they replace curiosity with judgment. When you call yourself lazy, you stop asking why you're avoiding something. You assume the Answer is obvious. Because I'm lazy. And once you've reached that conclusion, there's nothing left to explore. You don't look for friction, fear, misalignment, or cost. You just apply more pressure and hope shame does the job. It rarely does. Motivation doesn't vanish out of thin air. People don't wake up one day and lose the ability to care. What actually happens is quieter and more rational. The cost of action starts to outweigh the perceived reward. That cost might be failure, or rejection, or exposure, or responsibility, or the possibility that you'll try and still not get the outcome you want. When those risks feel too high, your brain does what it's designed to do. It pulls the emergency brake. From the outside, that looks like procrastination. From the inside, it feels like resistance. And instead of listening to that resistance, you attack yourself for having it. High performers are especially good at this. You're used to pushing through discomfort. You've been rewarded for grit, discipline, and achievement. So when something suddenly feels hard in a different way, emotionally hard, identity hard, you assume the solution is to push harder. But emotional friction doesn't respond to force. It responds to understanding. When you label yourself as behind, you're comparing your internal experience to someone else's external timeline. You don't see their doubts, their trade-offs, or the things they avoided to get where they are. You just see a highlight reel and conclude you're late to your own life. That belief creates urgency without direction. And urgency without direction doesn't produce action, it produces anxiety. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of what you call laziness is actually avoidance with a good reason. Not a good excuse, but a reason worth examining. Something about the task, the goal, or the expectation feels misaligned, risky, or heavier than you're admitting. Until you identify that cost, no amount of self-discipline will fix the problem. You'll just keep cycling between pressure and burnout, effort and withdrawal. The shift starts when you replace labels with questions. Not, why am I so lazy? But, what am I trying not to feel? Not, what's wrong with my motivation? But, what does this task threaten? My image? My comfort? My sense of control? Not, why am I behind? But, whose timeline am I measuring myself against, and why? Those questions don't let you off the hook. They put you on a more honest one. Because once you stop attacking yourself, something surprising happens. The resistance doesn't get louder, it gets clearer. And clarity is what creates momentum, not shame. You don't need more discipline. You don't need to work harder on yourself. You don't need to catch up to some imaginary schedule. You need to understand the cost you've been avoiding and decide whether it's worth paying. That's not laziness. That's leadership, starting with yourself. Chapter 3. The real reason capable people get stuck. Here's something most capable people don't want to admit. If knowledge were the solution, you'd already be done. You know what to do. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not in every detail, but enough. You've read the books, listened to the podcasts, taken the notes, made the plans. You're not short on insight. You're short on movement. And that's not an intelligence problem. Most people don't stall because they lack skill, discipline, or information. They stall because action has become emotionally expensive. Not difficult in a technical sense, emotionally difficult. That distinction matters. When we think of obstacles, we tend to imagine external ones: lack of time, money, resources, connections. But for high-functioning people, the real bottleneck is usually internal friction, subtle emotional resistance that shows up when an action threatens something we care about. Our image, our certainty, our sense of control, our belief that we're the kind of person who succeeds. Avoidance steps in not because you're incapable, but because the next step risks something that feels important. This is why trying harder doesn't work. When the problem is ability, effort helps. When the problem is avoidance, effort often makes things worse. You push, you force, you tighten the schedule, you add pressure. And the spenny too, resistance pushes back just as hard, sometimes harder. So you compensate the only way you know how, by preparing more research, more planning, more learning, more tweaking the system. Preparation feels safe. It feels productive. It gives you the illusion of progress without exposing you to the discomfort you're trying to avoid. And because you're smart, you get really good at it. But here's the trap. Preparation reduces uncertainty, not friction. And the friction is the problem. You can plan a difficult conversation endlessly, but the discomfort only shows up when you actually open your mouth. You can research a business idea for months, but the fear only appears when money, reputation, or rejection are on the line. You can refine your goals forever, but the risk only becomes real when you commit. Avoidance doesn't care how prepared you are. It cares about what's at stake. That's why capable people get stuck in such frustrating ways. You're functional. You're responsible. You're moving, but not forward. And because you can do many things well, you avoid the one thing that matters most by doing everything else. This isn't weakness. It's misdirected competence. Avoidance works by redirecting your effort away from emotional risk and toward low-stakes productivity. You stay busy. You stay respectable. You stay safe. And slowly, without any dramatic collapse, you stall. The real problem isn't that you don't know enough. It's that the next step requires you to feel something you'd rather not feel: uncertainty, vulnerability, disappointment, or the possibility of being wrong. So your mind does what it's designed to do. It protects you. It tells you to wait, to gather more information, to prepare just a little longer, not forever, just until it feels easier. It rarely does. Progress doesn't happen when friction disappears. It happens when you decide the friction is worth tolerating. That's the shift this book is built around. Not more motivation, not more confidence, not more force. Just a clearer understanding of what you're avoiding and why. Because once you name the emotional cost, it loses some of its power. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop pretending the problem is something else. And for the first time, the path forward isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming honest. Capable people don't get stuck because they're incapable. They get stuck because they're avoiding the exact discomfort that would move them forward. And once you see that, you can't unsee it, which is where things start to change. Chapter 4. Avoidance is a feature, not a flaw. Before we go any further, we need to clear up a major misunderstanding. Avoidance is not a personal defect. It's not a lack of courage. It's not a motivation issue. It's not proof that you're weak, immature, or self-sabotaging for no reason. Avoidance is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: keep you alive. For most of human history, avoiding danger meant avoiding death. Social rejection could mean exile. Failure could mean starvation. Uncertainty wasn't inconvenient. It was lethal. So, our brains developed a simple, effective rule. If something feels threatening, don't do it. That rule worked really well. The problem is that your brain never got the memo that your biggest threats now aren't predators or famine. They're emails, conversations, decisions, risks, public mistakes, emotional exposure. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a tiger and a performance review. It just knows this feels dangerous. So when you hesitate before speaking up, launching the project, making the ask, or committing to a path, your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's protecting you. It floods your system with doubt, second-guessing, and caution because, from its perspective, that's the responsible thing to do. This is why avoidance feels so reasonable. It doesn't show up as panic. It shows up as logic, as maturity, as patience, as thinking it through. It whispers things like, "Let's not rush this. You should probably prepare more. Now isn't the right time. There's a smarter way to do this." And because those thoughts sound sensible, you trust them. You assume their wisdom when they're really fear with a clipboard. That doesn't mean the fear is irrational. It means it's outdated. Modern challenges rarely threaten your survival. but they do threaten something else your brain cares deeply about: your identity, your reputation, your sense of competence, your image of yourself as someone who knows what they're doing. So, avoidance steps in to keep that image intact. It keeps you from looking foolish. It keeps you from being rejected. It keeps you from failing publicly. And in the short term, it works. You feel relief. The tension drops. You stay safe. You stay comfortable. You stay you. That relief is the reward that trains the behavior. Every time you avoid something uncomfortable and feel better afterward, your brain learns, good call. Do that again. Over time, avoidance becomes automatic, not because you're weak, but because it's been reinforced. This is why telling yourself to just push through often backfires. You're asking a protective system to stand down without giving it a reason to. And protective systems don't respond well to insults or ultimatums. They respond to understanding. When you see avoidance as a feature, not a flaw, you stop fighting yourself. You stop framing the problem as me versus my brain. Instead, you start working with it. You realize that the hesitation, the resistance, the urge to delay isn't random. It's a signal. It's your nervous system flagging a perceived threat and asking, are you sure about this? The goal isn't to eliminate that signal. The goal is to interpret it correctly. Because when your brain treats non-lethal discomfort like mortal danger, the solution isn't more caution, it's recalibration. That recalibration starts with awareness. Noticing when your reasons for not acting sound suspiciously responsible. When your logic feels airtight but your life doesn't move. When staying safe starts costing you growth. Avoidance feels intelligent because it once was. It feels protective because it still is. But the very system that kept your ancestors alive can now keep you from evolving. And once you understand that, avoidance stops being an enemy. It becomes a message one you can finally learn to read instead of obey. That's where choice comes back into the picture. Chapter 5. How avoidance keeps you safe and small. Avoidance works because it pays you immediately. You don't send the email, and the tension in your chest fades. You delay the conversation, and your day feels lighter. You put off the decision, and the pressure eases, at least for now. That feeling is relief, and relief is powerful. Your brain loves relief because relief means threat avoided. It doesn't care about long-term fulfillment or future versions of you. It cares about reducing discomfort in the moment. So, every time you choose comfort over confrontation, your brain marks it as a win. Good job. Crisis averted. The problem is that relief is a terrible long-term strategy. Every avoided action comes with a hidden invoice. You just don't see it right away. It shows up later as stagnation, self-doubt, frustration, and the vague sense that you're capable of more but somehow not accessing it. Avoidance keeps you safe by keeping you small. And it does this quietly. It doesn't destroy your life overnight. It erodes it slowly. One delayed decision, one unspoken truth, one risk you rationalized away. None of them seem catastrophic on their own. In fact, each one feels reasonable, responsible even. That's what makes avoidance so dangerous. Progress and comfort rarely live in the same place. Growth asks you to tolerate uncertainty, exposure, and the possibility of failure. Comfort asks you to stay where you are, protect what you have, and avoid rocking the boat. When you consistently choose comfort, your life doesn't fall apart, it just stops expanding. Careers plateau not because people lack talent, but because they avoid visibility, feedback, and uncomfortable growth. Leadership stalls not because of incompetence, but because difficult conversations go unhad. Businesses stay small not because of bad ideas, but because risk feels heavier than reward. Confidence erodes the same way. Confidence isn't built by thinking well of yourself. It's built by keeping promises to yourself. Under pressure. Every time you avoid something you know matters, a small part of your self-trust leaks out. You may not notice it at first, but over time it adds up. You start hesitating more. You doubt your follow-through. You second-guess your intentions. not because you're incapable, but because your history with yourself has become inconsistent. Avoidance teaches you a subtle lesson. I can't be trusted when things get uncomfortable. And once that belief takes hold, you stop aiming higher, not consciously, but automatically. What makes this especially tricky is that avoidance often looks like responsibility. You're not reckless. You're careful. You're thoughtful. You're managing risk. But when safety becomes the dominant value, progress becomes optional. And optional things rarely happen. The real cost of avoidance isn't failure. It's stagnation with plausible excuses. Years pass. You stay functional. You stay respectable. But the gap between what you're capable of and what you're actually doing slowly widens. And that gap is exhausting. It's where frustration lives. It's where resentment toward yourself quietly grows. Here's the shift that matters. Relief is not the same as resolution. Avoidance resolves nothing. It just postpones the cost and often increases it. What feels unbearable today usually becomes manageable once you face it. What feels safe to avoid often becomes heavier the longer you carry it. Growth doesn't require recklessness. It requires choosing long-term trust over short-term comfort. That means occasionally doing the thing that tightens your chest, having the conversation, making the call, committing before you feel ready, letting yourself be seen before you feel certain. Not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately. Avoidance will always offer you relief. Progress will always ask for courage. The question isn't which one feels better now. It's which one you want to live with later. Chapter 6. Why smart, driven people are especially vulnerable. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Being smart and ambitious doesn't make you immune to avoidance, it makes you exceptionally good at it. Intelligence is like a double-edged sword. It lets you see possibilities, patterns, and strategies, but it also lets you rationalize why you can't act. Ambition gives you stakes, which in turn gives your avoidance more justification. And self-awareness? Well, it turns procrastination into a full-blown internal debate worthy of a TED Talk. Think about it. You're capable. You plan. You know what you should do. And yet, something stops you. What do you tell yourself? I need more data. I'll do it when I have a clearer plan. If I rush this, it might fail. Sound familiar? That's avoidance wearing a suit. It looks like strategy. It sounds like prudence. But underneath, it's fear. And fear is far more convincing when dressed in logic. The smarter you are, the more options you have to rationalize inaction. You can overanalyze, create contingencies, or find minor risks to justify delay. You can rewrite your story until procrastination feels not only acceptable, but responsible. Ambition adds fuel. You care about your reputation, your trajectory, your goals. Avoidance can disguise itself as strategy for preserving these very things, delaying a difficult conversation until the timing is perfect, researching endlessly instead of committing to action, waiting to take risks until you're completely ready. The irony is that the very traits that help you succeed, intelligence, foresight, self-awareness, ambition, are also the traits that make avoidance almost invisible. While others might stall clumsily, high-functioning people stall gracefully. They stay busy, appear responsible, and even convince themselves they're making progress. That's why avoidance is so dangerous for the capable. You don't recognize it as avoidance. You think it's strategy. And because you're usually right, your plan is logical, the self-protective. Habit becomes invisible until months or years later, when you realize the thing you wanted hasn't moved an inch. The key takeaway: just because you're capable, driven, and aware doesn't mean you're immune. In fact, it means your avoidance might be smarter than you are. That's not a flaw, it's a reality. And the first step in breaking free isn't harder work, more information, or brute force. It's noticing the clever ways your brain keeps you safe and small while convincing you it's being responsible. Once you see it for what it is, you gain the chance to act consciously instead of letting sophistication hide your avoidance in plain sight. Because knowing the problem doesn't make it vanish, but it makes change possible. Chapter 7. When overthinking is just fear in a suit. Overthinking is one of the sneakiest disguises of avoidance. It feels productive, even virtuous. You're analyzing, strategizing, planning. You tell yourself, I'm just being thorough. I need clarity before I act. Except clarity almost never comes before action. It comes after. Here's the truth. When you're stuck in endless analysis, you're usually avoiding something, uncomfortable fear dressed in a suit of logic. Fear doesn't announce itself with panic or paralysis. It whispers, you might fail, you might be embarrassed, you might choose wrong. And your brain, being the clever little protector it is, translates that whisper into a rational checklist. I need more data. I should map all the options first. Let's explore one more angle. And suddenly, overthinking feels like preparation, research, or strategy. It feels responsible. And if it feels responsible, who can blame you? You're doing the right thing. Except the right thing isn't thinking forever. It's action. High performers are particularly susceptible to this trap. You're capable. You're strategic. You know how to optimize. So overthinking becomes elegant, sophisticated, and nearly invisible, especially to yourself. The problem is twofold. 1. Energy without progress. You're moving mentally, but not materially. Your brain is busy, your calendar is full, and your stress is high, but nothing meaningful is happening. 2. False confidence. You may convince yourself that you will act soon, that clarity is just around the corner. Meanwhile, fear quietly maintains control. Here's a simple test to see if your thinking is productive or just avoidance. If thinking brings you closer to a tangible next step, it's productive. If thinking keeps you in the same place while justifying delay, it's overthinking. The paradox of clarity is this: it rarely precedes action. It emerges from it. You figure things out because you try, stumble, adjust, and learn, not because you've exhaustively planned every possible scenario. So next time you catch yourself in a spiral of analysis, ask, am I solving a problem? Or am I avoiding the discomfort of acting? Overthinking feels smart. It feels safe. It feels responsible. But it's just fear in a suit. And the only way to see the suit for what it is? Move anyway. Take one small step. Do the thing you've been rehearsing in your head. The clarity, confidence, and momentum you crave don't come from perfect planning. They come from imperfect action and the courage to start before the fear goes away. Because the longer you wait for clarity, the more entrenched the fear becomes, and the farther you are from the life you actually want. Chapter 8. Preparation, Productivity, and the Illusion of Progress. Here's a hard truth most ambitious people don't want to admit. Being busy is not the same as moving forward. You can read every book on leadership, strategy, or self-improvement. You can plan, organize, optimize, and checklist your life to death. You can attend every seminar, complete every course, and draft a dozen contingency plans. And yet, none of that guarantees progress. Not real progress, at least. Productivity is seductive because it looks like action. It feels like progress. It earns respect. Your calendar is full. Your inbox is managed. Your reports are on time. You can even measure it. And to everyone else and often to yourself, it looks responsible, even admirable. But here's the catch. Productivity is the perfect disguise for avoidance. High-performing people are especially vulnerable because they value preparation. Being ready is praised. Planning is rewarded. And when preparation starts to replace action, procrastination no longer feels lazy, it feels strategic. Ask yourself, are you reading another book because you need knowledge? Or because starting the project feels too risky? Are you reorganizing your calendar because it will help? Or because it feels safer than making the first uncomfortable call? Are you optimizing systems because it truly improves outcomes? Or because it's easier than facing uncertainty? If the answer leans toward avoiding discomfort, congratulations, you've discovered one of avoidance's cleverest disguises. socially acceptable busy work. The illusion of progress is dangerous because it quiets the inner critic. You look like a mover and shaker, so your brain congratulates itself while the real work waits in the shadows. You feel competent, effective, even disciplined, but the thing that truly matters remains untouched. And here's the kicker. This kind of avoidance can actually feel productive long-term. The more you prepare, the more rational your delay seems. The longer you stay busy without acting, the stronger the illusion that you're moving forward. Until one day you realize months or years have passed, and the life you imagined isn't any closer. True progress, on the other hand, is messy. It's visible. It feels risky. It involves exposure, discomfort, and sometimes embarrassment. It doesn't always come with a neatly scheduled outcome or a measurable, deliverable, but it moves you forward in ways preparation alone never can. The lesson is simple, but uncomfortable. Preparation is essential, but it can't replace action. Productivity can feel virtuous, but it can also be a socially acceptable hiding place. Moving forward is rarely neat, often imperfect, and always uncomfortable. But it's where growth actually happens. If you want to break free from the trap of busy work, start asking a crucial question before every task. Am I doing this because it matters or because it feels safe? When you can answer honestly, the illusion fades, and real progress becomes possible. Chapter 9. Waiting for clarity, confidence, or the right time. There's a reason waiting for the right moment feels virtuous. It feels mature, patient, responsible, thoughtful. Waiting seems like wisdom, except most of the time it isn't. For ambitious, high-functioning people, waiting is often avoidance in disguise. It's the polite, socially acceptable version of "I'm scared." You tell yourself, "I'll do it once I feel ready. I need more confidence before I start. I'll wait until the timing is perfect." It sounds reasonable, so reasonable that you almost believe it. And while you wait, the uncomfortable reality is that the thing that matters most remains untouched. Here's the critical insight. Confidence is rarely a prerequisite for action. It's a byproduct. You gain confidence because you act, not because you magically feel ready. You don't wait until you're courageous. You become courageous by doing the things that scare you. Clarity works the same way. You rarely get perfect understanding before starting. Most clarity comes after action. You figure things out on the move, adjusting as you go, learning from mistakes, testing boundaries. Waiting for perfect clarity is just another way to avoid the friction of the unknown. And the right time? Spoiler alert, it doesn't exist. The right time is always messy. Life rarely lines up with your plans. Circumstances are never perfect. Waiting for ideal conditions is like waiting for the stars to align before leaving your house. It's convenient in theory, but it keeps you stuck. The trick is this. Action creates the very things you're waiting for: confidence, clarity, and momentum. Here's a simple exercise to spot avoidance masquerading as patience. Ask yourself what you're waiting for. Ask what would happen if you acted today. Ask whether the risk is truly catastrophic or just uncomfortable. More often than not, the risk is discomfort, not disaster. And discomfort is manageable, especially compared to the cost of inaction, stalled progress, dwindling self-trust, and the subtle erosion of confidence. Waiting feels safe. It feels responsible. But in reality, it's often just a way to delay paying the cost of growth. If you want to stop spinning your wheels, you have to act first and trust that clarity, confidence, and the right time will catch up. Because they always do, for those who stop waiting and start moving. Remember, the fog lifts not by waiting for it to clear, it lifts by walking through it. Chapter 10. The conversations you don't want to have. Avoided conversations don't vanish. They linger, they fester, and over time, they compound into tension, resentment, and missed opportunities. For ambitious, high-functioning people, difficult conversations are especially tempting to skip. It's not that you don't care, you just fear the discomfort. awkwardness, confrontation, or even the possibility of being misunderstood. So instead, you stay silent, you defer, you let the words sit in your head unsaid. In leadership, avoidance can look like postponing a performance review, dodging tough feedback, or sweeping team conflict under the rug. It feels easier in the moment, but it rarely solves the problem. In fact, it often makes it worse. Problems left unspoken don't disappear. They grow in shadows, influencing behavior and undermining trust. In personal relationships, avoiding difficult conversations creates subtle erosion. Boundaries go unspoken, expectations remain unclear, and unaddressed issues silently shape how people treat you and how you treat yourself. The tension doesn't vanish, it just simmers. The irony is that avoiding conflict to keep the peace often generates more conflict than facing placed and unquote it head on. Silence breeds assumptions. Assumptions breed frustration. Frustration breeds resentment. And resentment quietly corrodes connection, confidence, and self-respect. The truth is simple but hard. Uncomfortable conversations are unavoidable if you want growth, clarity, and integrity. They aren't a test of toughness, they're an opportunity to practice honesty, establish boundaries, and cultivate trust. Here's a mental shift that helps. Stop thinking of the conversation as a confrontation and start thinking of it as a negotiation with reality. You're not attacking anyone. You're not asking for perfection. You're simply clarifying expectations, expressing truth, and taking responsibility for your part. Avoidance feels safe. Courage feels uncomfortable. But the discomfort of a single conversation is almost always less than the long-term cost of silence. The conversations you avoid today compound into problems tomorrow. And the only way to prevent that is to face them not perfectly, not fearlessly, but honestly and deliberately. Because every time you speak what matters, even a little, you reclaim power over your life instead of letting avoidance do it for you. Chapter 11. The decisions you keep delaying. Indecision feels safe. It's tempting to sit on the fence because choosing wrong might hurt, embarrass, or cost something. Staying in limbo feels like control. You're not failing, not risking, not committing. You're just waiting. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Not choosing is still a choice. And like every choice, it has consequences. Every day you delay, energy drains, clarity fades, and momentum grinds to a halt. The mental space you'd use to act gets consumed by what-ifs, rehearsed scenarios, and second-guessing. The more you avoid choosing, the heavier life feels. High-performing people often rationalize delay as strategy. I'll decide once I have all the information. I need to be sure. This is the right move. If I wait a bit, I can avoid mistakes. But here's the irony. Perfection rarely arrives, and waiting often compounds risk rather than reduces it. Opportunities pass, projects stall, relationships strain, confidence erodes, and all the while avoidance masquerades as prudence. You're not broken, you're avoiding summit. The key is realizing that making an imperfect decision is almost always better than making none at all. Action creates momentum. It teaches lessons, reveals information, and clarifies the next step. Even mistakes move you forward. They shrink fear, build self-trust, and give you the ability to adapt. Think of indecision like quicksand. The longer you hesitate, the deeper you sink. But any forward movement, even a stumble, pulls you out. The act of choosing releases trapped energy and replaces uncertainty with movement. This chapter isn't about reckless decision-making. It's about understanding the hidden cost of delay and embracing action, even when it feels uncomfortable or incomplete. Every day you postpone, you're paying interest on a debt called unmade choices. The good news? You can start paying it down today. Pick one decision, make a choice, accept imperfection, and watch momentum return, often faster than you expected. Avoidance might feel safe. Deciding, even imperfectly, feels risky. But risk is the currency of progress, and progress is impossible without spending it. Chapter 12. The risks you keep rationalizing away. Here's a reality most ambitious people wrestle with. Growth always involves risk. Always. There's no shortcut, no perfectly safe route, no zero failure path to success. Yet, we humans are wired to avoid risk. Our brains treat uncertainty like a threat and creativity, ambition, or change like potential danger. So we get clever. Instead of outright avoiding growth, we rationalize it away. We tell ourselves stories that sound reasonable, and because they do, we buy them. I'll wait until I have more experience. I shouldn't invest until the market stabilizes. I'll step up to leadership once the timing is perfect. These justifications aren't lies. They're mental constructs your brain uses to avoid discomfort. And here's the sneaky part. They feel smart. They feel responsible. They sound like strategy. But underneath, they're fear. For professionals, this means opportunities for leadership, influence, and promotion pass quietly. For entrepreneurs, it means ideas stay on paper and potential revenue goes unrealized. For anyone ambitious, it means the version of yourself you could become bolder, more capable, more visible never fully emerges. Risk doesn't feel like a cliff jump. It feels like discomfort, nervousness before a pitch, uncertainty about a decision, the vulnerability of being seen. Avoidance doesn't need dramatic failure to do damage. It works in subtle ways, quietly limiting what you attempt, how boldly you act, and how much you trust yourself to handle setbacks. You're not broken, you're avoiding summit. Here's the paradox. The very actions that feel risky are usually the ones that build confidence, competence, and credibility. Avoiding them feels safe, but it costs far more than discomfort ever could. The solution isn't reckless leaps. It's calibrated courage. Small, deliberate exposure to risk that moves the needle. Making a decision, taking a step, speaking up, or investing in an idea, all with the knowledge that discomfort is part of progress. When you stop rationalizing every risk away and start acting despite fear, you reclaim control. You stop letting fear write your story. You start proving to yourself that you can handle uncertainty and that your growth isn't limited by your capability, but by your willingness to face it. Avoidance may feel reasonable, but reasonableness without action is often the quietest thief of potential. And the only way to recover what's been stolen is to step into the risks you've been avoiding all along. Chapter 13. Productive, capable, and quietly stuck. Here's a scenario many high achievers know all too well. You're doing fine. Your career is stable. Your projects get completed. You check the boxes. People respect you. You look successful. And yet, something feels off. That feeling isn't a mystery. It's avoidance. Specifically, avoidance disguised as busyness. You're moving. You're productive. You're capable. But the motion lacks direction. The tasks fill the day, but they don't move you toward what actually matters. Think about it. You read the latest books and take courses, but never implement what you learn. You optimize workflows and schedules, but avoid the big decisions that matter most. You manage crises and deadlines, but sidestep the uncomfortable growth opportunities. All of these behaviors feel responsible. They feel productive. And because they look good on paper, your brain rewards you with relief, satisfaction, and a sense of control. The catch? That sense of control is an illusion. This is what it feels like to be quietly stuck, constantly moving, yet not moving forward. You're busy, but not progressing. You're capable, but not growing. You're fine, but the nagging sense that life could be bigger, more meaningful, or more aligned never leaves. The exhaustion comes not from effort, it comes from tension, from carrying unspoken goals, deferred decisions, and unacted upon potential. Every avoided action adds weight. Every postponed risk adds friction. And your brain, trying to protect you from discomfort, keeps you busy enough to avoid facing the real problem. Here's the subtle tragedy. High-functioning people are often the best at this. You can maintain functionality while quietly stalling your own growth, fooling yourself into thinking you're fine. The antidote isn't working harder or getting even more productive. It's recognizing where motion has replaced progress. It's asking the uncomfortable questions. Am I busy? Or am I moving toward what actually matters? Am I acting? Or am I avoiding? Am I fine? Or am I quietly stuck? Acknowledging the gap between busyness and progress is uncomfortable but necessary. Once you see it, you can start redirecting energy from motion to meaningful movement. Because being capable without growth is exhausting. Being productive without purpose is draining. But the first step to forward momentum is noticing that quiet stagnation and choosing to move differently. Chapter 14. What avoidance is actually costing you. Avoidance doesn't just postpone progress, it quietly steals something far more valuable: self-trust. Every time you sidestep a difficult conversation, delay a decision, or rationalize away a risk, you send a subtle message to yourself: I can't handle this right now. And while that message feels protective in the moment, it chips away at confidence, clarity, and resilience over time. The costs are often invisible at first. Mental fatigue. Your brain constantly juggles unfinished tasks, unresolved issues, and unspoken truths. Avoidance demands energy, even though it feels like relief. Reduced confidence. Each avoided action is a tiny erosion of self-trust. You start doubting your ability to follow through, handle discomfort, or make effective choices. Narrowed opportunities. Growth requires risk. Avoidance keeps you safe, yes, but it also keeps you small. Opportunities pass quietly while you rationalize staying put. Stalled progress. You remain capable, busy, and functional. But the things that truly matter linger untouched. Here's the paradox. Avoidance feels like conserving energy, but it actually drains it. The more you defer, rationalize, or sidestep, the heavier life feels. Stress, tension, and uncertainty accumulate, leaving you mentally fatigued and chronically dissatisfied. Confronting discomfort, on the other hand, restores energy. Taking action, even small steps, creates forward momentum, releases mental load, and rebuilds self-trust. Every time you face what you've been avoiding, your internal narrative shifts. I can handle this. I can take responsibility. I can move forward. Think of avoidance like a slow leak in a tire. You keep driving, but the pressure drops gradually. Every avoided action is a small hole, and over time, the car struggles to move efficiently. Facing discomfort is the patch that restores pressure, allowing progress to roll forward with energy, confidence. The real cost of avoidance isn't dramatic failure, it's subtle, cumulative, and quietly limiting. Recognizing that cost is the first step. Acting despite discomfort is the second. When you start paying attention to what avoidance is actually costing you, you stop mistaking relief for safety and start seeing discomfort as a signal that growth, clarity, and self-trust are waiting on the other side. Chapter 15. This is not about becoming fearless. Let's get something straight. The idea that meaningful work or growth or success requires fearlessness is a myth. Fear doesn't disappear just because you finally decide to do the thing you've been avoiding. It doesn't magically vanish once you start that new project, confront that colleague, or take the risk your gut has been nudging you toward. In fact, fear shows up everywhere. Fear is inevitable. Fear is normal. Fear is human. The problem isn't fear itself. The problem is thinking that fear is a stop sign. Most people wait for courage to appear like a prepackaged gift. I'll do it when I feel brave enough. But here's the kicker. You'll never feel fully brave. If you wait for fearlessness, you'll wait forever. Fear is not the enemy, it's the companion you have to walk with. Courage, real courage, is not about the absence of fear. It's about willingness. It's about saying, I'm going to move forward anyway, even though I feel this fear. Courage is messy, uncomfortable, and imperfect. It often feels awkward. You might stumble. You might fail. You might look foolish. And that's exactly the point. Courage isn't glamorous. It's practical. It's functional. It's the muscle that grows the more you use it. Here's the brutal truth about avoidance. Every time you sidestep discomfort, you reinforce the idea that fear should control you. You teach yourself that safety is the highest priority, that ease is the ultimate goal, and that discomfort is a signal to stop. But in reality, discomfort is a signal to act. It's a warning that you're on the edge of growth, that you're confronting something that matters. Avoiding it doesn't protect you, it keeps you small. So what's the alternative? You don't need to feel fearless. You need to feel willing. You need to practice moving forward with fear as a constant companion. The first step is noticing fear without letting it dominate your decision-making. Acknowledge it, name it, sit with it, and then act anyway. High performers often struggle here because they've been conditioned to equate fear with incompetence. But the truth is the opposite. If you're feeling fear, it usually means you're on the right track. It means you care. It means the stakes are real. And it means growth is possible. Waiting for courage is the ultimate form of avoidance. Acting in spite of fear is where momentum begins. You don't need to feel ready, prepared, or fearless. You just need to move forward, one imperfect step at a time, because the only way out of avoidance isn't through vanishing fear, it's through learning how to walk with it. And once you start, you'll notice something remarkable. The fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its power over your decisions. Step by step, choice by choice, willingness becomes habit. And that's how you reclaim the life you've been avoiding all along. Chapter 16. Learning to be honest instead of harsh. Here's the truth most ambitious people don't like to admit. Self-criticism feels motivating, but it rarely works. You tell yourself, I should be further ahead by now. I'm lazy. I'm not disciplined enough. And for a brief moment, it feels like a kick in the ass, a push to get moving. But here's what actually happens. Instead of motivating, harsh self-talk shuts you down. It saps energy, triggers stress, and makes avoidance feel safer than action. The more you attack yourself, the more your brain interprets discomfort as danger, and avoidance ramps up. Productivity stalls, decisions get delayed, and the nagging feeling of I should be doing more becomes a self-fulfilling trap. The solution isn't self-compassion in the fluffy sense, it's honesty. Honest self-assessment is clear-eyed, practical, and objective. It doesn't yell at you for failing. It observes patterns, identifies behaviors, and calls out avoidance where it lives without turning it into a character flaw. Think of it this way. Harshness says, you're broken because you haven't done enough. Honesty says, here's what's happening, here's what you're avoiding, and here's what you can do next. One shames, the other clarifies. One creates fear, the other creates leverage. High performers often mistake guilt and self-judgment for accountability. They push harder, criticize more, and hope it will produce results. It rarely does. Responsibility, not shame, is the driver of action. Responsibility focuses on the facts, what you've done, what you haven't, and what you can do right now. It's empowering, not punishing. Here's how to practice honesty over harshness. 1. Notice the narrative. Catch the voice in your head that says, I'm failing, or I should be better. 2. Translate it to facts. Replace judgment with observation. I haven't started X yet, instead of I'm lazy. 3. Focus on action. Ask yourself, what can I do right now to move forward? Rather than berating yourself for past inaction. 4. Track patterns, not people. Avoid labeling yourself as broken or incompetent. Look at repeated behaviors and systems instead. Honesty isn't soft. It's precise. It's sharp. It tells you the truth without undermining your confidence. It allows you to see what you've been avoiding, measure the cost, and decide on a path forward. Self-harshness feels productive. Honesty is productive. One traps you in avoidance, the other frees you from it. Mastering this distinction is a critical step toward reclaiming your time, energy, and momentum, and finally moving toward what actually matters. Because the people who succeed aren't those who beat themselves into action, they're the ones who face themselves clearly, responsibly, and without unnecessary cruelty. Chapter 17. Small confrontations that create real momentum. Here's the thing. Most self-help books won't tell you. You don't need a life overhaul to get unstuck. You don't need to quit your job, move to another country, or reinvent yourself overnight. Those big, dramatic solutions feel satisfying, but are rarely sustainable. Real progress comes from small, deliberate confrontations with the discomfort you've been avoiding. Avoidance isn't about cowardice. It's about your brain protecting you from emotional friction. And the way out isn't heroics, it's strategy. You need manageable, intentional actions that chip away at the walls of avoidance without breaking you. Think of it as momentum engineering. Tiny confrontations that, over time, compound into meaningful change. Here's why it works. Small actions reduce fear while building proof of competence. Every time you act on something you've been postponing, you generate feedback. You discover that the discomfort isn't lethal, that mistakes aren't catastrophic, and that your ability to handle challenges is greater than you thought. Action builds confidence in a way reflection, planning, or guilt never can. Some practical ways to start. 1. Micro decisions. Take the smallest possible step toward a postponed decision. Pick a DAWW.R date, make a call, or outline an action plan. The act of choosing disrupts inertia. 2. Mini confrontations. Face small, uncomfortable conversations first. Clarify expectations, ask a question, or express a boundary. You'll find that the anticipated dread is far worse than the reality. 3. Incremental exposure. Break intimidating tasks into tiny, repeatable steps. If launching a project feels overwhelming, start by drafting a paragraph, sending an email, or scheduling a short meeting. Progress compounds from consistency, not perfection. 4. Track wins. Celebrate small victories. Each completed confrontation reinforces self-trust and shows that avoidance isn't mandatory. Momentum isn't created by leaps, it's created by repetition. Small confrontations, repeated intentionally, dismantle the cycle of avoidance while keeping your life intact. The key is consistency, not intensity. Here's the catch. Your brain will try to sabotage you with excuses, rationalizations, or better, timing. That's normal. But by practicing deliberate confrontation, you train yourself to move forward in spite of discomfort. Over time, fear shrinks relative to action, and avoidance loses its power. The point is simple. You don't have to burn everything down to start moving forward. You just need to start doing the things you've been quietly avoiding, one small step at a time. Those tiny confrontations accumulate into real momentum, and eventually, they transform the way you live, work, and lead. Because progress isn't about fearlessness, it's about willingness, and willingness is built through repeated, intentional action. Chapter 18. Stop running from the thing running your life. Here's the hard truth. For most of your life, you've been running from discomfort, running from uncertainty, running from the conversations, decisions, risks, and actions that actually matter. And here's the kicker, you probably didn't even realize you were running. Avoidance is sneaky. It hides behind productivity, preparation, strategy, and rationalizations, making you feel capable while quietly controlling your life. The good news: avoidance loses its power the moment you see it clearly. Naming it, understanding it, and acknowledging its grip is the first step to reclaiming agency. Once you can point to what you've been avoiding and understand why, it stops being some vague, amorphous force dictating your choices. It becomes something you can face, manage, and ultimately outmaneuver. Moving forward differently doesn't require perfection, fearlessness, or a complete reinvention. It requires honesty, willingness, and action. Start with one thing: a conversation, a decision, a risk, or a project you've been sidestepping. Act without waiting for clarity, confidence, or perfect timing. The momentum you gain from confronting the discomfort will naturally build the next step and the one after that. Trust yourself. Each small step reinforces your ability to handle discomfort, to make decisions, and to move forward. The more you act, the less power avoidance has, and the more your self-trust grows. You begin to see that discomfort isn't a stop sign. It's a signal that you're doing something that matters. Here's the key insight to carry forward. Progress isn't born from endless preparation or motivation, it's born from action, informed by honesty. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop letting fear dictate the timeline. Stop letting avoidance quietly run your life. The thing you've been avoiding, whatever it is, has more to teach you than your comfort ever will. Face it. Move through it. Take responsibility for it. And watch as momentum, clarity, and confidence follow naturally. Because once you stop running from the thing running your life, you stop being a passenger. You start steering, and for the first time in a long time, you start moving forward on your own terms. The path isn't easy, and fear won't disappear. But action, honesty, and willingness, stronger than avoidance, and they'll get you farther than you ever imagined. Closing reflection. Here's the part most self-help books skip. The reflection. Not the inspirational quotes, not hype, not the big promises, just a quiet moment to look back at everything you've learned and forward at what you can do. You started this book thinking something was wrong with you. Maybe you felt lazy, unmotivated, or behind. Maybe you thought your fear, your hesitation, or your busyness was a flaw that needed fixing. By now, you've discovered a different truth. You're not broken. You're human. You're capable. And the reason you've been stuck isn't incompetence, it's avoidance. Avoidance isn't shameful. It's not proof that you're weak. It's a survival strategy that served you once, but now it's holding you back. And the power of awareness is that it lets you make a choice. You can keep running, or you can start acting. You can keep rationalizing, or you can start confronting. You can keep waiting, or you can start moving, even imperfectly, toward what actually matters. The small steps you take matter. The micro actions, the tiny confrontations, the decisions you've been postponing, they all accumulate. They rebuild self-trust, restore momentum, and quiet the inner voice that tells you you're not enough. Courage isn't a sudden, dramatic shift. It's repeated willingness, day after day, moment by moment. So here's the takeaway. Stop measuring yourself against some imagined standard of fearlessness, perfection, or readiness. Start measuring yourself by willingness, honesty, and action. Face what you've been avoiding. Step forward, even a little. Trust yourself, and notice how progress, real, tangible, sustainable progress, starts to follow. Because the life you've been avoiding isn't locked away in some distant future. It's waiting on the other side of discomfort, hesitation, and fear. And the only thing standing between you and it is the choice to finally stop running. You're not broken. You just have to face the thing you've been avoiding. And when you do, you'll realize that all along you had everything you needed to move forward. This is your moment. Step into it.